Okay. Liberals out. Lefties out. This is aimed at the conservatives, okay? They're going through a rough time right now, okay? Their face was just like Derek Chauvin's as he got layered out. Guilty verdict after guilty verdict after guilty verdict, okay? And I understand you're confused and you're upset, okay? You want to live in a world where cops can use extreme and unwarranted measures which lead to the death of people and not face any legal consequences. And that's just, today at least, that's not the world we live in. I know you're upset, okay? I want to preempt some of these arguments that I'm going to be hearing over the next year, okay? Are you guys ready for it? Are you ready for it? Okay, let's do it. We're going to run them through, people. First off, fentanyl Floyd. The jury was rigged. He died of fentanyl. No, there was plenty of expert testimony very convincingly indicating that the restriction of George Floyd's breathing was, in fact, the primary determinant in his death. Additionally, second-degree unintentional murder does not require your actions to be the sole and only cause of death. Just partially causing a person's death can be enough. Keep in mind, for example, you know what's even more debilitating than fentanyl? Being really fucking old. But as it turns out, if you strike a really old person and they die from oldness, you're still responsible for killing them. You can't argue, oh, well, they were old. They were pre-existing condition. Nope, you still killed them. Sorry. And as Derek Chauvin's supervisor and fellow officers were happy to testify, Derek Chauvin's use of force on George Floyd was not part of department policy. It was unwarranted, unexpected, and not justified. He has had a previous record of abuse used against other people. He was no angel, that Derek Chauvin guy, which is why I'm very happy to see him go to prison. See, you may be angry right now because you see the the hypocrisy, okay? The conservatives, they don't riot, you know, they're not mad. But when the Black Lives Matter types get mad, they burn down cities. They get so angry. And I think this is the root of the main argument that people use against Black Lives Matter, use for Derek Chauvin. This broader argument that conservatives don't build buildings down, black people do. Why are they so angry and we're not? Well, the main reason for that is because you're not actually protesting any injustice. When a black person sees that video of George Floyd dying, they see reflected in George Floyd's teared eyes every story they've been told from their family and friends, every bit of history they learned about their race and how they're treated in America. George Floyd was a reflection of police treatment of every black American. Not just police treatment, but the criminal justice system as well. The provable and objective and inarguable, as much as you may try, biases that can be found in all of these institutions. They see that in what happened to George Floyd. Was George Floyd a perfect person? No. Nobody's saying that. This is a very common Candace Owens argument. Why are you making a hero of George Floyd? Nobody, to quote a famed stand-up comedian, BLM didn't pick George Floyd. You did, actually. Derek Chauvin did, actually, pick George Floyd. Nobody else did. George Floyd wasn't just walking around and somebody deified the man and decided to make him a civil rights hero. No. You killed him. You did that. You made the selection. You chose. You discerned. That's your fault, buddy. And it turns out a person doesn't have to be an angel to be a star of a civil rights movement. Because people aren't arguing George Floyd is perfect. You know, I've never actually heard a progressive say that. Not a Black Lives Matter type, not a white person, not a black person. I've never heard anybody say that George Floyd was perfect. Conservatives always say he was no angel. Nobody's saying he's an angel. Nobody's even talking about whether or not he was an angel. They were talking about whether or not he was murdered. And today, officially, as designated by the state and the jury, he was. And murderers go to jail. You can complain all you want that the Black Lives Matter types get angry. They burn down cities and buildings. What, by the way, a widely overstated claim. If you take a look at the amount of damage done by Black Lives Matter protests, riots, what have you, first of all, there's the broader statistic that very few of these protests go violent, and many of the ones that go violent, the violence is started by the police. A fraction of BLM protests have violence initiated by the BLM protesters. I think, in fact, more often, police initiate it with their tactics designed to cut off people, block them in, fire shots into the crowd, tear gas canisters, and rubber bullets. You're likely to initiate violence when that's what you're gunning for. But even beyond that, there's a broad overstatement. The actual harm caused by BLM. What was it, a couple billion in damages? That's not nothing. I feel bad for the small businesses who had their businesses burnt down, you know? It's not like every business that got burnt down was owned by some sort of fat cat white supremacist or whatever. There were innocent people hurt, and that sucks. That's a real bad thing. I don't think people defend that. But riots are going to happen in times of great injustice. They happen here in America. They've happened here in America historically. They happened all around the world. Great injustice brings great suffering, and suffering leads people to riot. That's just what happens. You can argue that the conditions do not decide or determine that a riot is justified, but riots are never really about justification, are they? I mean, if you want to fix riots, you can't just crack down on them harder and harder. Does that work anywhere? Chat, has that ever worked? An oppressed population in a country, do you just crack down on them harder and that just fixes social unrest? No, never. There are really two roads that you can go this way. You go, you fix the systemic problem, you know, land of the free, home of the brave, make this country equitable like it's supposed to be, or you go full genocide and systemically exterminate a population. Now, I know you're not in favor of the latter. I know you would never signal anything like the latter. So that really only leaves us with one solution, doesn't it? And it's to fix the problem. Or did you think what? Telling the black community their problems are their own fault, that was going to fix it? Like, it's like magically, like, oh, wow, oh my, the black people in the inner city, they're like, oh wow, I thought all this sociological and criminological data pointed to our systemic oppression. We just weren't trying hard enough. Okay, sure. Who's living in fantasy land, huh? Now, conservatives don't riot after stuff like this because conservatives aren't facing injustice. The treatment of Derek Chauvin, that's not injustice. He was not treated poorly. He was a murderer. Got convicted for murder. That's not injustice. The reason why you're not protesting, rioting, what have you right now is because you've got no skin in the game, buddy. The people who are mad over this, all these conservative pundits, your Tucker Carlsons, your Ben Shapiros, they're all millionaires living in gated communities filled with white people. They don't care. They care about this insofar as it benefits their media profile. It's just another minor position they can hold to forestall the inevitable encroachment of BLM onto every aspect of American society. But for black people, this means everything. Because if a man can do what Derek Chauvin did and walk, that says a whole hell of a lot about how much the people in America care about black folk. Black people have all the skin in the game. You wonder why they get angry? They have all the skin. They have completely skinned themselves. They are walking muscle and ligament and fat automatons. All their skin has already been set aside into the game. That is how it works. What do you have? You have a little pinky tip? You have nothing. Of course you're not angry. The only reason conservatives are mad about this is because they don't want to live in a country where black people get justice. Real. Like, real. We know. That's it. But that's a little worry. That's a little worry in the back of your head. A fear magnified 1,000 times maybe by watching Tucker Carlson, but in terms of how it actually affects your life, we're talking negligible, minimal, minor, non-existent. Whereas the real material consequences of stuff like this affects black people very significantly. So you can rave and rant all you want, conservatives, about how unfair all of this is, but conviction's the conviction. And just this time we won. And if history's anything to look back on, we're only gonna keep winning from here. Generally, you don't see significant backslides into regressivism unless you end democracy entirely like you tried to do back in 2020. But, you know, barring that, as long as you want to live in a country that even remotely resembles the institutions that were laid out in the Constitution, you have to acknowledge the fact that we are only growing more popular, and you should be happy about that. Because we aren't just defending black people, you know. Black Lives Matter really isn't just about black people. Black Lives Matter is primarily about black people because black people are the main victims of the police. But white people would benefit from the police being reformed. Because we all suffer from these institutions and their biases and their cruelty. We suffer in every conceivable way. Let's take the most privileged man around. Let's take this upper middle class white guy, lives in a gated community. Would it not be to his benefit to live in a society which upholds the values he believes it does? Would it not be to his benefit to reconcile the cognitive dissonance he must live with, to believe simultaneously that this is land of the free, but also the land with the highest absolute and per capita prison population? The cognitive dissonance weighs on his mind like an anchor, but we can solve it by fixing these problems. You want to talk economics? It turns out keeping a section of your population in perpetual poverty actually isn't great for people economically. You want to fix that? You're not going to fix that by ignoring the problems the black and poor communities experience at the hand of police. You want to be proud of the country you live in? Well, how can you be with the state that it's in? You want highly educated workers? Well, then why are you precluding tens of millions of people from quality education by tying the quality of their schooling to the wealth in their zip codes? There's no getting around it. We all benefit from an equal society. Everyone does. Maybe black people do the most, but that's just because they're getting kicked the hardest. You can't blame them for caring about the outcome of trials like this. Maybe even caring a lot. So, Derek Chauvin can get fucked forever, permanently fucked, eternally fucked, even. He can go to hell. Fuck him. George Floyd's dead, of course. No real justice for the dead, mind. Justice comes for the living, the people who will be affected by the implications of this outcome. And to every conservative who's mulling over this, just, man, a black guy got murdered by a cop who was denounced by his own fucking supervisor and coworkers. And you're angry he got convicted for it. You pull out every excuse in the book. Your leaders fed you horseshit. Your Steven Crowders, your Ben Shapiros, your Candace Owens. They fed you every ounce of horseshit they could muster. They tilted the scales as much as possible. And he still got convicted on 3 counts. And you're still in the minority. Maybe stop eating up the horseshit. And then you won't be so angry about just outcomes like this one. I feel bad for you because what makes you happy and what's good for you are fundamentally opposite. They're 2 completely separate things. You have been led to be made happy by things which hurt you and hurt people you think you care about.